Okay, let's get into this. The idea that everything we see, everything we touch might just be, well, one layer of reality, maybe not the whole picture.
Exactly. It's a pretty wild concept.
Yeah, and today we're diving deep into a particularly mind-bending possibility. Not just distant stars, but maybe something right here, hidden in plain sight almost. We're talking about the conspiracy theory that some alien intelligence might exist in a fourth spatial dimension.
A place our senses just, can't normally tune into.
It's fascinating, right, how this theory takes something pretty abstract, like the fourth dimension from math and physics.
And tries to make it, well, tangible, or at least potentially real in terms of explaining things like UFOs or UAPs, as we call them now.
Right, it really pushes boundaries. So for everyone listening, think about this. Maybe those strange lights in the sky, the UAPs doing impossible turns.
Yeah.
What if they're not just advanced tech in our three dimensions? Could they be like shadows
No.
or ripples, interactions from a reality just sideways to ours, a fourth spatial dimension leaking through?
That's the core idea. And to even start thinking about that, we really need to pin down what we mean by a fourth spatial dimension. It gets confusing because people often talk about time as the fourth dimension.
Ah, good point. We need to be clear. This isn't time.
No, not in this context. This is imagining another direction. Like,
Well,
you have length, width, height, right, up, down, left, right, forward, back.
yeah, the good old X, Y, and Z axis.
Exactly. This would be another axis, say a W axis, totally perpendicular to all three of those. As different from up as up is from forward, it's tough to picture.
Okay, so fundamentals. Our world, 3D. We move along those three axes. Simple enough?
Pretty intuitive, yeah, we live it every second. Getting from here to there involves some combination of those three movements.
So how do we even begin to imagine something beyond that? I know there's an analogy that helps. The 2D world thing.
Ah, yes, the flatland analogy. It's super helpful. Imagine beings living on a completely flat, two-dimensional surface, like drawings on a sheet of paper.
Okay, got it. Flat Stanley's world.
Kind of, yeah. Their whole universe is just that plane. They can move forward, backward, left, right, but up or down, that concept wouldn't even exist for them as a direction of travel.
Right, no concept of height. So what happens if we, a 3D object, interact with their 2D world? Like, if I poked my finger through their paper.
Well, they wouldn't see your whole finger at once.
Yeah.
From their perspective, what would happen is, first, a small dot might appear out of nowhere as the tip touches their plane.
Okay.
Then, as more of your finger passes through, that dot would become a small circle, which would grow larger, maybe change shape a bit depending on the angle.
Like a cross section.
Exactly, a 2D cross-section of your 3D finger. Then, as you pull your finger back out, the shape would shrink back down to a point and then just vanish. To them, it would look like a shape appearing, morphing, and disappearing. Magic, almost.
Okay, I can visualize that. So now the big leap. Apply that same logic to us in our 3D world, encountering a 4D object.
It follows the same principle. We wouldn't perceive the whole 4D object. We'd only perceive its three-dimensional cross-section as it passes through our space.
A 3D slice of a 4D thing. What would that even look like?
The classic example is the hypercube, or tesseract. Think about how you get a cube. You take a 2D square and drag it or extrude it into the third dimension.
Right.
Well, hypothetically, if you could extrude a 3D cube into the fourth spatial dimension, you'd get a 4D hypercube.
And we can't really see that directly, can we?
No, but we can see its 3D projection, or its shadow in our space. You've probably seen those drawings. Looks like a smaller cube inside a larger cube with the corners connected.
Yeah, I've seen those. They look kind of impossible.
They do. And if a real tesseract were moving or rotating through our 3D space, interacting via that fourth dimension, we'd see that 3D projection morph and change in really bizarre ways. Parts might seem to pop into existence or pass through each other, or maybe a sealed object could appear to turn inside out without breaking.
Whoa. Okay, so that's the kind of visual weirdness that proponents of this theory might point to. Seemingly impossible physics.
Theoretically, yes. If you saw something truly inexplicable like that, maybe it could be interpreted as a 4D interaction. And this leads to thinking about what beings who could naturally perceive and move in 4D could actually do.
Right, what are their potential superpowers from our perspective?
Well, for one, they could see all sides of a 3D object at the same time. Think about it. We have to turn a box around to see every side. And we can't see inside unless we open it or use x-rays. A 4D being could, conceptually, just look around our 3D limitations. They could perceive the entire volume of the box, inside and out, simultaneously.
That's hard to wrap my head around. Total information about an object instantly.
Pretty much. And think about their movement. They could potentially disappear from one spot in our 3D space and reappear in another.
Like teleportation.
Sort of, but maybe not instant travel through our space. More like taking a shortcut around our space via the fourth dimension. Imagine stepping out of a locked room by moving in that fourth direction, walking around the wall in 4D space, and stepping back into our 3D space in the next room.
Without ever touching the door or the wall as we know it.
Exactly. To us, it would look like they just vanished and reappeared.
And manipulating things. Could they, like, tie a knot in a closed loop of string without cutting it?
That's the kind of thing theorists suggest. Or maybe reach inside a sealed container and rearrange its contents without breaking the seal, all by manipulating it along that extra, unseen fourth axis.
Okay, this is definitely where it starts sounding like straight-up fantasy or sci-fi. But this is the bedrock of the theory we're discussing.
It is. The core idea is that maybe some alien species didn't just evolve technologically, but perceptionally. Maybe they evolved to naturally see and use this fourth spatial dimension,
Giving them abilities that would seem utterly godlike or magical to us poor 3D-bound creatures.
Precisely. And if that's the case, their presence could be completely hidden from us.
Because our senses just aren't built for it. We're like those 2D beings unaware of the finger passing above their plane.
That's a key part of the theory. They might not need camouflage. Their very dimension could be the cloak. They could be all around us, interacting with their dimension, and we'd be none the wiser unless they specifically intersected with ours in some way.
Which brings us back to UAPs. If these beings can pop in and out of our dimension or move around our space,
Then those sudden appearances, disappearances, right-angle turns, at impossible speeds, the things that seem to defy physics as we know it.
might be explained as the maneuvering in the fourth dimension.
That's the argument proponents make. It's not necessarily breaking our laws of physics, but operating according to the physics of a higher dimension, which allows for effects that look like violations in 3D.
Okay, so UAPs are a big one. But the theory tries to explain more, doesn't it? Like paranormal stuff.
Yes, it gets applied there too. Think about classic poltergeist activity or hauntings, objects moving on their own, things passing through walls, doors opening and closing.
Yeah.
From this 4D perspective, maybe those aren't ghosts or spirits in the traditional sense. Maybe they're the result of a 4D entity subtly interacting with our 3D world. A nudge from the fourth dimension could make a book fly off a shelf, perhaps.
So it's like an interdimensional explanation rather than a supernatural one?
That's the framing, yes. It replaces one unknown with another, arguably, but it connects it to physics, even if theoretical.
Interesting. And what about crop circles? Those always come up.
They do. Some of those patterns are incredibly complex, geometrically sophisticated. Proponents look at the intricate designs, sometimes with apparent perspective tricks or symmetries that feel off in 3D.
And suggest there may be 2D projections of 4D geometric concepts left by these beings.
That's the speculation, like a 4D being leaving a footprint or a message on our 2D-like surface, the field, reflecting their higher dimensional understanding of geometry. Again, highly speculative.
Definitely. It requires quite a leap. And the theory even dips into ancient history, looking at myths and art.
Right. This involves reinterpreting old stories or artwork. Could depictions of gods, angels, demons, or interactions with spirits actually be descriptions of encounters with 4D beings?
Our ancestors trying to describe something they couldn't possibly comprehend using the language and concepts they had.
That's the idea. Of course, this is massively interpretive and ignores more conventional historical and cultural explanations. You have to be careful not to just impose the theory onto the past.
Makes sense. And finally, what about subjective experiences? Like near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences?
Some people who report NDEs or OBEs describe things like seeing their body from above, perceiving events far away, or feeling like they're in a space without normal dimensions. Some proponents of the 4D theory suggest these might be brief moments where human consciousness somehow accesses a slightly wider perception, maybe touching on or getting a glimpse of this higher dimension.
Wow, okay. So a whole range of unexplained phenomena potentially tied together by this one concept.
That's the appeal of the theory for some, yeah. It offers a single, albeit exotic, framework.
But it raises a huge question.
Yeah.
If they're here, maybe interacting in these subtle or bizarre ways, why stay hidden? Why not just, land on the White House lawn?
Good question. The theory offers a few potential reasons. One is simply incomprehensibility.
Meaning
Their existence, their thoughts, their motives might be so utterly alien, so rooted in their 4D reality, that meaningful communication or interaction as we understand it is impossible, like us trying to explain philosophy to an ant.
Okay, the gap is just too vast. What else?
Observation, the classic prime directive idea almost. Maybe they're studying us.
Like cosmic anthropologists.
Could be. Their 4D perspective would be the ultimate observation blind, wouldn't it? They could watch everything in our 3D world without us ever knowing, studying our development, our biology, our societies.
That's a slightly creepy thought. Undetected surveillance on a planetary scale.
It is. And then there are the more, speculative and potentially worrying ideas.
Such as?
Subtle manipulation. Could they be influencing events on Earth, guiding our history, maybe promoting certain technologies or social changes for their own long-term goals? Goals we can't even guess at.
Okay, now we're getting into deeper conspiracy territory. Influencing humanity from another dimension.
It's part of the spectrum of ideas within this theory. And even further out, some suggest they might be harvesting something from our dimension.
Harvesting? Like what? Resources? Energy?
It's usually proposed as something subtle, maybe energy, maybe tapping into consciousness somehow.
Yeah.
Things we wouldn't even notice are being taken because the mechanism operates via the fourth dimension.
Right, these are all ways to explain the apparent silence or hiddenness.
Yeah.
But we absolutely have to talk about the problems with this theory, the pushback.
Absolutely critical. Because, let's be blunt, the biggest issue is the complete lack of direct, verifiable evidence.
Yeah, everything cited UAPs, ghosts, crop circles has other potential explanations, right?
Exactly. Many UAPs turn out to be mundane things. Paranormal claims are notoriously difficult to prove scientifically. Crop circles have been demonstrated to be hoaxable. Ancient myths have cultural contexts. NDEs have neurological explanations being explored.
So the theory is basically taking existing mysteries and layering another even bigger mystery on top of them.
You could certainly argue that. It relies on explaining the unknown with the even more unknown. And it heavily leans on theoretical physics. The math of higher dimensions exists, sure, but that doesn't automatically mean they physically exist and are occupied by intelligent life that can interact with us.
It's a huge extrapolation from the math to reality.
A massive one. And we have zero observational data to confirm that kind of interdimensional travel or interaction is even possible, let alone happening. The practical physics of how a 4D being would interact with 3D matter are completely speculative.
We don't know the rules of that game, if it even exists.
We don't even know if there is a game. What would the energy requirements be? What would the effects be on space-time? Could they interact without causing massive, catastrophic disruptions? We just don't know. It's fascinating speculation, but the scientific grounding is currently absent.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, we've journeyed into this really far out concept of aliens potentially existing in a fourth spatial dimension.
Yep. We looked at how that dimension might work, using analogies, and how beings there might perceive and interact with our 3D world in ways that seem impossible to us.
We covered the kinds of phenomena, UAPs, paranormal events, etc., that proponents link to this idea, and the potential reasons these beings might stay hidden.
But we also hit the major counterarguments: the lack of solid evidence, the reliance on unproven physics, and the plausible alternative explanations for all the cited phenomena.
It's definitely one of those ideas that, whether you buy into it or not, really makes you think about perception, reality, and our own limitations, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Even if the theory itself is pure speculation, the exercise of trying to conceive of higher dimensions of realities beyond our senses is valuable. It stretches the mind.
It reminds us that what we perceive might not be all there is. Our senses evolved for survival in this 3D world, right?
Exactly. They might not be equipped to register everything the cosmos has to offer.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is this: how much might we be missing? If our senses define our reality, what realities might exist just outside that sensory bubble, completely unseen, unheard, unfelt by us? What else could be out there, layered right alongside our own world?
It's a humbling and mind-expanding question to ponder.